We saw this in the first term. Is people didn't believe me when I came out and said we were closer to the brink of nuclear war than folks realized, because Donald Trump was tweeting us all the way to the brink with North Korea, so much so that at the Department of Homeland Security, we had to do those exercises to prepare for the possibility we might get into a nuclear war. But it was even worse than that. I remember going into a secure facility after the North Koreans had just launched a test missile, and we didn't know if it was headed towards the United States. And you know what Donald Trump called to talk to us about? I would have hoped he was calling to say, is everything okay? Are we going to be okay? He called to say, we got to deport him at the border.
Stop. Right there. Read that back. Slowly. A North Korean missile had just been launched. Nobody knew where it was going. The Department of Homeland Security was in a secure facility. The kind of facility you go to when you genuinely don't know if you're about to be at war. And the President of the United States called. He called. And what he said, what he chose to talk about in that moment with a potential warhead unaccounted for, was deportations. Not, are we going to be okay? Not, what's the trajectory? Not, do we have confirmation it's not headed toward U.S. soil? The border. He called about the border. That's not a political attack. That's not spin. That is a first-hand account from a person who was in that secure facility, on that call, in that moment. And it raises a question that should be front-page news everywhere. But somehow, it's not. Why? We're going to get to that. But first, let's go back to the beginning of this conversation. Because the nuclear call isn't even the only thing that came out of this panel. There's also the footage. There's the 3am posting. And there's a double standard that one panelist named so clearly, so specifically, that you'll understand immediately why this story matters and why it isn't getting the coverage it deserves.
They're lying to him like there's no tomorrow, because that's the team he wanted to have in the second term. He was so irked that he spent 4 years in the first term hearing from people that were telling him bad news. This is like any autocrat who, through history, we hear this story again and again and again. They don't like to hear bad news. He does not have people around him who want to tell him bad news. And when he does encounter it, because you can't be in the real world right now without encountering the fact that there's a heck of a lot of bad news out there that he's responsible for, he doesn't care. He dismisses it. And it's interesting to hear you talk about the Clinton administration. What's so scary is more than half of the people alive in the United States today were not alive when there was a balanced budget in the United States.
That's
right?
true.
Since Bill Clinton became president, more than half of the country was born after that. We've never lived in a time when there was a balanced budget, the majority of this country. And even then, people are upset about what this man's doing. Look, those numbers, remember, this week started off...
You guys are such Republicans that a balanced budget is your, highest bar for whether or not the economy is in a good place.
Oh, man, you say balanced budget, we are ready to go dance.
What about child care? Remember when the tariffs were going to pay for child care?
But you actually raised an interesting and I think an important point, because... did we suffer from, a loss of revenue and support for child care with a balanced budget? No. Did we suffer for other programs that are part of the safety net of this country because the president balanced the budget? No. The balanced budget process is a choice. It is always about choices. And right now, and I think recent history will tell you, Republicans, I don't think have chosen wisely, because they've said we cannot do those things. And we've just heard the president say this. We feed people. How the hell am I supposed to feed people?
He said we can't do child care. We can't do all these things they want us to do.
I will just say this, that as a conservative,
here we go.
I don't think balanced budget really matters at this moment to most people.
I think that's
people used to be worried, don't bankrupt the federal government. Right now, people are saying, Donald Trump, don't bankrupt me. And I'm on the edge because of everything you've decided.
Well, I also I think they're asking if the lights are on and if anyone is home. My colleague Simone here wrote a really incisive piece for MS Now that sort of puts the Biden situation, the Trump situation side by side. Let me read you some of Simone's writing. Republicans said Biden was tired and old. They questioned his stamina as entire news cycles were built around whether he had the energy for the job. But nobody argued that he was going to take the country to war on an impulse. That is the difference. What we are seeing now is not about age, it's about instability. So I want to take Simone's point, hold it in high regard, and at the same time show you just a little clip of the president nodding off, blinking really hard, and then you can tell me what you think.
More than a decade that other wealthy nations have been getting a free ride on American innovation.
Position to create the cures for tomorrow. Second,
I think it's both ends.
He sleep.
I will just say before you answer, because when I was writing this, I made the point to say in the top of this piece, I'm not saying this is like a little political jab because I used to be a political staffer, right? It is being reflected in the polling. In the Reuters Ipsos polling, Americans who were polled are saying many of them feel as though the president has lost a step over the last year.
A majority.
That he is more erratic, that they would not describe him as stable. And so the logical conclusion to just those numbers is in fact to ask the questions, well, is the president okay? Has he lost a step? And before I wrote it, and then he sleep. What? If Joe Biden had fallen asleep in the Oval Office on camera multiple times, it would be all we were talking about. Yeah. I am frustrated because it feels as though that we are giving Donald Trump a pass because everyone is concerned if they're going to be sued.
I agree. And I think we need to worry that his sleepiness is getting sleep.
Let's sit with a few things that just happened in that clip. One panelist says Trump is surrounded by people who tell him only what he wants to hear. Another compares this directly, explicitly to the pattern of autocrats throughout history. And then comes this line, which I want to highlight because it's the most important framing in this entire conversation. What we are seeing now is not about age. It's about instability. That's not a liberal talking point. That's the result of Reuters/Ipsos polling, a majority of Americans surveyed saying that Trump has become more erratic, that they would not describe him as stable. And this came up before the clip of him apparently nodding off on camera. Now, I want to be precise here. One panelist was careful. She said, "I wasn't in the room. I don't know if he was actually asleep." That's fair. That's responsible. Watch the footage yourself and make your own call. But here's the thing. Even the most conservative reading of that moment lands in uncomfortable territory. Because if it had been Joe Biden, if Biden had appeared to fall asleep in a public setting on camera, even once, it would have been a 5-day news cycle. It would have been the lead segment on every network. It would have been the clip that got replayed on every talk show, every late night show, every political ad through the end of the election. And that's exactly what one of the panelists said, almost word for word. And she's right. I am frustrated because it feels as though we are giving Donald Trump a pass because everyone is concerned they are going to be sued. That sentence is doing a lot of work. She's not just saying the press is biased, she's saying the press is afraid. Specifically, afraid of legal consequences. And that fear, that very specific, very real fear of being on the receiving end of a lawsuit from this particular administration, is shaping what stories get told and how. Think about what that means for you, watching at home, trying to understand what's actually happening. Now add the 3am posting. This wasn't speculation. One panelist pulled up the actual timestamps on screen. The President of the United States was posting on social media from 12:18 a.m. to 2:45 a.m. The next morning, he was in public, appearing to struggle to stay awake. And the panel's response, this line specifically, this is where it got real. We're laughing. But you've got to laugh to keep from crying. Because this is crazy. That's not a commentary line. That's exhaustion. That's people who spend every day watching this. Professionals, former officials, journalists, and they are burned out from trying to process what normal governance looks like anymore. And that feeling that we're laughing because we don't know what else to do feeling, millions of Americans feel that every single day. But we still haven't gotten back to the most important moment, the nuclear call. Here is what we know, based on what was said on camera by a person who was there. During the first Trump administration, North Korea launched a test missile. Nobody knew in real time if it was headed toward the United States. The Department of Homeland Security went to a secure facility. The president called. He did not ask about the missile. He did not ask about readiness. He did not ask if American lives were at risk. He talked about deportations. Now, the panelist who shared this story also made a separate point, and I think it's the most important point in the entire segment. She said, "We were closer to the brink of nuclear war than people realized. People didn't believe me. Didn't believe her then. Do you believe her now? Because this is the same president, the same pattern, the same instability that multiple panelists, including former government officials, are describing as getting worse, not better, more grandiose, more erratic, less tethered to the actual consequences of decisions made in that office. And the press, by her account, is too scared of litigation to ask the obvious questions. That leaves one group of people to ask those questions. You. The double standard is real. The 3M posting is real. The footage is real. The North Korea call is real. And the question, is the president okay? Is he stable? Is he fit for the decisions that land on that desk every single day? That question is not only fair. It's the most important question in American politics right now. And the fact that most mainstream outlets won't frame it that way tells you everything you need to know about why videos like this one exist. If this story hit different, if you learned something you hadn't heard anywhere else, share it. That's the only algorithm that matters. Drop it in a group chat, send it to someone who needs to see it, and leave a comment with the moment that got you. Subscribe if you want more coverage like this, the stories that are happening, but somehow never trend.